For years, the public has always believed that Prince William had only one sibling, Prince Harry. But recently, shocking rumors have begun circulating within royal circles. William once had a secret sister, and the reason she was never revealed to the world is far darker than anyone imagined. Sources from inside the palace claim that her existence was deliberately hidden for decades, buried beneath political calculations and the fear of damaging the image of the royal family. And the most astonishing part, Prince William himself has reportedly broken his silence, confirming that this lost sister is indeed real. So, what made William decide to speak up now? Is this the result of a family secret that has been buried for far too long, or a consequence of power struggles behind the closed doors of Buckingham Palace? And more importantly, who exactly is this mysterious sister? And why was she forced to live in the shadows of the crown? These questions have sent shockwaves throughout Britain. Could this be the biggest royal cover-up in modern history? One that might change the way the world sees the family of King Charles forever? But what do you think? If this revelation turns out to be true, do you believe the royal family had the right to hide one of their own? A blood relative, just to protect their public image? Share your thoughts in the comments. But because today's story will make you question everything you thought you knew about the House of Windsor. The palace was quiet, wrapped in the kind of silence that only came when the duties of the day were done and the corridors stood still. Inside Kensington Palace, the air carried a soft warmth. The laughter of children had faded. The gentle voice of Kate had settled into silence, and the ticking of the old clock was the only sound that dared to interrupt the night. Prince William sat alone in his study, a pen resting between his fingers, his eyes fixed on the window where the lights of London shimmered faintly. The world saw him as calm, steady, a man born into responsibility and molded by duty. They called him the future king. Strong, reliable, everything the monarchy needed him to be. But behind that quiet strength, something else lived. Something that had followed him for decades, like a shadow that never left his side. Every morning, he rose before dawn, helped his children get ready, tied little shoelaces, smiled at their innocent laughter, and kissed Kate goodbye before stepping out to face the waiting cameras. His smile was perfect, his gestures graceful. He greeted the world with that familiar warmth, the same one his mother once carried. Yet, when the cameras turned away, that smile faded into something softer, almost tired. Kate had seen it many times. She knew the difference between the public calm of her husband and his private quiet. It was in the way his eyes lost focus sometimes, like he was looking at something no one else could see. It was in the nights when he would sit by the window long after she had gone to bed, a cup of untouched tea beside him, his gaze distant and heavy. "Will?" she would ask gently, touching his arm. "Are you all right?" He would smile and nod. Always the same answer. "Just thinking, darling. Go on. I will be up soon." But even she knew he was not just thinking. He was remembering. When the palace grew still and the moonlight spilled across the study walls, William would unlock a small wooden box hidden in the corner of his desk. Inside were pieces of a past that had never truly let him go. A handful of letters written in the handwriting of his mother, a few old photographs, and one faded hospital bracelet. The bracelet, tiny and fragile, had a name barely visible after so many years. He would hold it gently, his thumb brushing over the letters, as if the warmth of his touch could bring back what time had taken away. That box was his secret world, one that no official papers, no royal speeches, and no public duties could touch. Sometimes he would read the letters again, even though he had memorized every word. They were not love letters or formal notes. They were fragments of thoughts, things Diana had written late at night, words filled with longing and confusion. Some spoke of dreams for her boys. Others hinted at something deeper, something left unfinished. Each time he read them, he felt his heart twist in a way he could not explain. There was always a sense of someone missing. Someone who should have been part of their story but never was. Family gatherings often brought that feeling to the surface. When the children played, when laughter filled the rooms, or when birthdays came around, he found himself growing quiet. There was always a moment when his gaze drifted away, his mind traveling to places no one else could follow. Kate would notice it and reach for his hand, grounding him back to the present. He was grateful for her patience, her understanding, and her silence. She never pushed, never demanded answers. She simply stayed beside him the same way Diana had stayed beside him during the storms of his childhood. But deep down, she knew there was something her husband had never spoken of, a chapter of his heart sealed away long before she came into his life. Tonight, however, was different. The weight he had carried for years felt heavier than ever. The day had been filled with the usual smiles and public grace, but when the last light went out in the corridor, he found himself unable to escape the pull of memory. He opened the box once more. The bracelet lay there, glowing faintly in the moonlight. It was so small, made for the wrist of a newborn. He traced the faint letters again. The handwriting of his mother came back to him. The way she wrote his name with love, her voice whispering, "Never forget kindness." "My darling boy." He swallowed hard, his chest tightening as old emotions rose like waves. He remembered the night he found that box for the first time, tucked among the belongings of Diana years after her death. He had not understood then. Not fully. But now he did. Every letter, every silence, every look his mother gave him before she left. They all made sense. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes burning. The page before him was blank, but his heart was overflowing. He picked up his pen and began to write. "My dearest," he started softly, his hand trembling. "There are things the world was never meant to know, but I can no longer carry them alone." The words came slowly, painfully, like drops of truth spilling after years of silence. He wrote about the weight of duty, about how the crown demanded perfection while the heart begged for honesty. He wrote about Diana, her warmth, her laughter, her sadness, and then about the secret she had carried, the one that haunted her even in her happiest days. As his pen moved, the air around him seemed to grow heavier. It was not just a letter, it was a confession, a release of everything he had buried deep within himself. He paused for a moment, staring at the bracelet beside the page. "You were never meant to be forgotten," he whispered, his voice trembling. The room felt smaller, filled with the ghosts of memories he had spent years trying to silence. He could almost hear the voice of Diana again, gentle and comforting. He could see her smile, the way she looked at him and Harry with so much love, as if her entire world was in their eyes. But beneath that love, he now saw the sorrow, the part she never shared with the public. He wrote for hours. The night deepened, and the palace slept. But his words flowed endlessly. Each sentence felt like a wound opening, but also like healing. He wrote of the hidden pain behind royal walls, of the laughter that sometimes felt forced, of the long years of silence that followed the death of his mother. When the final words were written, he signed his name quietly. The ink shimmered under the light. Still wet, still alive. He folded the paper gently, slid it into an envelope, and sealed it. As dawn approached, William stood by the window, holding the letter close. The sky was soft pink now, and the city began to stir. He looked out at the sleeping gardens, the place his mother had once walked, and whispered, "I kept my promise. Mom." He placed the envelope beside the photo of Diana on his desk and returned the bracelet to the box. Then, closing it carefully, he locked it again. The secret was safe. But the truth, at least in words, had finally been spoken. Kate entered quietly a few minutes later, her eyes still soft with sleep. "You did not come to bed," she said gently. He turned, smiling faintly. "I had something I needed to finish." She looked at the letter, at the calm in his eyes, and nodded. She did not ask. The palace had always felt large, but after the death of Diana, it became unbearable. The walls seemed to echo with silence. Every step too loud, every breath too heavy. The laughter that once filled the halls was gone, replaced by the stillness of grief. Curtains were drawn tighter, voices softer, and even the air felt colder, as though the light had left with her. Prince William was just a boy, but he carried himself like a man who had already lived 1,000 lives. His younger brother Harry clung to him for comfort, and William tried to be strong, tried to hold the world together the way his mother once did. But nothing could hide the emptiness that followed them everywhere. At breakfast, in the chapel, in the long, lonely nights, he often sat alone by the window in his room, staring at the gardens where his mother used to walk. He remembered her voice, her laughter, the way she would call his name from across the lawns. But more than that, he remembered something else, something strange that had never left his mind. Sometimes she spoke in riddles, her voice barely a whisper. "There are things, William," she would say softly, "things they do not want spoken about." At the time, he thought she meant politics, scandals, the usual secrets that came with being royal. The world was always watching, and the palace was always hiding something. But the way she said it felt different, almost personal. One evening, she had stayed longer than usual. The house was asleep, and only the soft ticking of the clock filled the room. She looked at him with a strange sadness, her eyes glistening under the dim light. "Promise me," she said, her voice shaking, "that you will always look for the truth, no matter how long it takes." He nodded, confused but sincere. "I promise." "Mom," she smiled faintly, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Good boy." Those words would haunt him later. After her death, memories became his only comfort and his deepest pain. The palace, once alive with her warmth, turned into a house of whispers. He remembered her laughter echoing down the halls. As he grew older, small things began to resurface in his mind, and fragments of conversations, things he had not understood then, but now played over like puzzles waiting to be solved. He remembered once walking past her study when she did not know he was there. Her voice was hushed, trembling. She was speaking to her closest friend, one who had always been by her side during difficult times. "They think I will forget," Diana said quietly, "but I cannot. I hear her in my dreams sometimes. I see her face." William froze, too afraid to move, too curious to turn away. The voice of her friend was low, concerned. "You have to be careful. Di, they will never let you talk about it." "I know," his mother whispered, her voice breaking, "but she is my child, too." The heart of William had pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. He had no idea what they meant. A child? Who was she talking about? He had wanted to run in to ask. But something held him back. Maybe fear. Maybe instinct. That night, he could not sleep. His mind raced with questions. Had he heard it wrong? Was his mother talking about the child of someone else? The next morning, she acted as though nothing had happened. She made pancakes, laughed with Harry, and asked William about school. Her smile was warm, but her eyes carried a quiet ache he had not noticed before. As the months passed, he began noticing small things he had never paid attention to before. His mother often disappeared for hours without explanation. When she returned, her eyes were red, her face pale. Sometimes he saw envelopes on her desk, sealed with no address. Once he found a photograph tucked inside one of her books, a picture of a baby girl wrapped in a pink blanket. On the back, in the handwriting of his mother, were the words, "My little one." When he showed her the photo later, she froze for a moment before smiling faintly and taking it from him. "Where did you find this, darling?" she asked gently. "In your book?" he replied. Still curious. "Who is she?" Diana did not answer. She simply pulled him into her arms, holding him tighter than usual. "One day you will understand." "My darling," she whispered into his hair. But not yet. He never forgot that moment. The way her voice trembled. The way her tears fell silently on his shoulder. Years passed. Time carried him away from boyhood and into the strict, structured world of royal duty. But no amount of protocol could erase what he had heard. The whispers, the photograph, the tears. They stayed with him, locked in a corner of his heart that he rarely opened. When he lost his mother, he lost the chance to ask her the questions that haunted him. At her funeral, standing beside Harry, he looked at her coffin and felt the crushing weight of everything left unsaid. "Who were you talking about?" "Mom?" He wanted to cry out. But all that came was silence. Sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, he could almost hear her voice again. There are things they do not want spoken about. Now, as an adult, those words echoed louder than ever. He had grown into the man the world expected him to be. Composed, loyal, calm, but inside, a question still burned. Who was the one they did not speak of? He began to see the world through the eyes of his mother. The way she had fought for truth. The way she had challenged silence. He realized that her sorrow was not just about her marriage or the crown. It was deeper. It was about loss. A loss the world never knew existed. He often returned to his childhood room at Kensington Palace, now restored, but still carrying traces of the past. Sometimes he would sit by the same window where he once watched his mother walk in the garden. The trees had grown taller, the flowers different, but the memories remained. He would close his eyes and remember the warmth of her hand, the sound of her laugh, the way she called him, "my darling boy," and then her final whisper, "One day you will understand." Now he did. It was not about royal scandals or family mistakes. It was about love. A love that had been hidden, silenced, buried beneath palace walls. His mother had carried a secret that broke her heart. A truth she could never speak aloud. As he stood there, staring into the fading light of evening, he felt tears sting his eyes. For years he had tried to protect her memory, to hold on to the part of her that belonged only to him and Harry. But now he understood that there was another part, one the world had never seen. He whispered softly into the empty room, "I know now. Mom, I finally understand." The words hung in the air like a promise. The palace was still, the night quiet. But somewhere deep within its walls, the echoes of her voice lingered. Gentle, warm, eternal. The afternoon sun poured softly through the attic window at Anmer Hall, lighting up dust motes that danced lazily in the air. The air smelled faintly of cedar and thyme, the kind of scent that carried the quiet weight of memories. Stacks of old letters, photo albums, and carefully folded clothes surrounded her. She smiled as she lifted a faded scarf from one box, pressing it gently against her cheek. "She must have loved this color," she murmured, her voice soft. It was then her fingers brushed against something different. A small wooden box tucked beneath a pile of yellowed papers. It was plain but carefully crafted, its edges smooth, its lock faintly golden. Kate tilted it toward the light and noticed a tiny emblem engraved on the lid. A single letter D. Her heart gave a small, curious thump. When she opened it, the hinges creaked faintly, as if resisting the light after years of stillness. Inside lay a small diary bound in pale leather, its pages edged with gold. The lock was delicate but broken, and when she lifted it, she froze. The handwriting was neat, slanted, unmistakable. It was the diary of Diana. Kate caught her breath in her throat. She held it like something sacred, afraid even to turn the pages, the quiet of the attic pressing around her. Then she whispered, "William needs to see this." When William entered later that evening, his shirt sleeves rolled up. His eyes softened at the sight of her sitting by the attic window. "You have been up here all day," he said gently. "What did you find?" Kate looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "Something you should see." She handed him the diary. The moment his eyes met the cover, he stopped. His heart began to race. This was hers. Kate nodded. He ran his fingers over the worn leather, his hands trembling slightly. For a while, he could not open it. The sight of the handwriting of his mother, so familiar, so full of life, stirred something deep within him. It had been years. Yet her memory lived in every part of him. Finally, with a deep breath, he opened the first page. The ink had faded in places, but her voice was there, alive, gentle and haunting. April 1979. It began. "The palace feels colder each day. I wonder if this is what loneliness truly feels like. Surrounded by gold, but starved of warmth." The eyes of William moved across the words slowly, each one like a whisper from the past. Diana had written about her early days before marriage, her quiet walks in the gardens, the expectations placed upon her, the way her laughter was measured by watchful eyes. Then came the entry that made him catch his breath. June 1980. "They told me she did not make it. They said it was better this way. But my heart does not believe them. I felt her. I heard her first cry. And then nothing. I asked to see her, to hold her. But they refused. They said it was best for me to rest, to forget." But how does a mother forget? The hand of William began to shake. The words blurred. He looked up at Kate, his voice barely a whisper. She wrote this before I was born." The eyes of Kate filled with quiet sorrow. "Keep reading," she said softly. He turned the page, each line cutting deeper. August 1980. "I am told to move on. They say it was a tragedy that must stay private, that it would hurt the monarchy. But I cannot sleep. I keep dreaming of her face. I wake up with my hands reaching for someone who is not there." Tears welled in the eyes of William. The diary did not read like a royal document. It read like the heart of a young woman breaking in silence. Diana had been so full of light, but beneath that light, there had been so much pain. A pain she had hidden behind her smile. He turned to another entry, dated a few weeks later. "I remember her hand. Tiny. Warm. For just a second, then they took her. I have been told not to speak of it, to act as if it never happened. But I know what I felt. I know she existed." William stared at the page for a long time. The words swam before him, his mind spinning. A daughter. His mother had written about a daughter. He whispered the words aloud, barely able to breathe. She thought she had a baby girl. Kate reached for his hand, her touch steady and warm. "Maybe she truly did," she said softly. She would not have imagined something like that. He flipped through the rest of the pages. The handwriting became shakier, the tone heavier. Diana had written about sleepless nights, about how those around her dismissed her pain, how she was told to smile and carry on for the sake of the royal image. The next page was blank. The diary ended there abruptly, just before her wedding to Prince Charles. William stared at that empty page as though expecting more words to appear. But there was nothing. Just silence. He closed the diary slowly, his chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. "This is not just a rumor," he said quietly. She really believed she had lost a child. Kate nodded, her eyes full of emotion. I cannot imagine what she went through to carry something like this and never be allowed to speak of it. He leaned back in his chair, his face pale. His hand still trembled as he held the diary close, as though afraid it might vanish. All these years, he murmured. I thought I knew everything about her. But this changes everything. Kate moved closer, her hand resting gently on his arm. Maybe she wanted you to find it, she said softly. Maybe she wanted you to know she never stopped loving her children. All of them. He looked at her, his eyes distant but full of feeling. It hurts to think she carried that alone. For a long time, they sat in silence. The golden light from the attic window spilled across the floor, illuminating the diary between them. A small, delicate thing holding a secret too heavy for words. William finally placed it back in the wooden box, his fingers lingering over the cover. He whispered, almost to himself. She always said she hated secrets. Maybe this was the one she could not bear to tell. As Kate watched him close the lid, she saw the change in his expression, the quiet grief, the shock, and something else beneath it, understanding. He stood, the box still in his hands. The evening light was fading now, casting a soft glow over the attic walls. She always followed her heart, he said quietly. Even when it led her into pain, they left the attic hand in hand. The box pressed close to his chest. The truth had been hidden for decades, sealed within the fragile pages of the diary of a mother. And though it left him shaken, it also brought him closer to her, closer than he had ever felt before. As they descended the stairs, William glanced back once more at the attic door. He whispered into the dim light, I found you. Mom. I finally understand the secret. Uncovering the truth. The quietness of the night inside Anmer Hall was broken only by the gentle ticking of the clock. The fire had dimmed to soft embers, casting a warm, sleepy glow over the sitting room. Prince William sat alone, his fingers tracing the rim of a teacup he had not touched in an hour. Across the hall, Kate had fallen asleep after reading bedtime stories to the children. Yet the mind of William was far from rest. His thoughts circled back to the secret that had shaken his world to its core. A secret buried for decades beneath royal silence. It had been only a few weeks since he discovered the diary. Since then, nothing felt the same. The air at Anmer Hall seemed heavier, and even laughter from his children sounded like echoes of something fragile. He had not spoken about it. Not to Harry. Not even to Kate. Since that night, she found the box. But something inside him had changed. He decided to find answers on his own. No press. No palace advisors. No official letters. Just him. A son desperate to uncover the truth about the words of his mother. He began discreetly making quiet phone calls from his private study. His tone was calm, but his hands often trembled as he held the receiver. I am looking for someone who worked with my mother during her early years, he would say. Careful not to reveal too much. He reached out to old staff lists, former aides, and even retired hospital workers. Some declined to speak. Others claimed they remembered nothing. But one name kept appearing. Nurse Alice Hampton. Alice had been a young midwife in the early 1980s, stationed near a private royal residence. She was long retired now, living quietly by the sea in Devon. The private secretary of William arranged the meeting under another name. The drive down was long and silent. The countryside rolled past like a memory he could not touch. He remembered the voice of his mother, the softness of her laugh, the way she had once told him, "One day you will understand." My darling, those words had haunted him since childhood. But now they guided him. When he arrived at the small cottage, the sea breeze carried a scent of salt and quietness. Alice answered the door slowly, her frail frame wrapped in a thick cardigan. Her eyes widened slightly when she recognized him, though she said nothing. Instead, she invited him inside, her voice trembling. I thought you might come one day." William sat across from her at a wooden table, sunlight streaming through lace curtains. "I need to ask you something," he said softly. "About my mother." The hands of the woman fidgeted with her teacup. "Your mother was kind," she whispered. "So kind. Too kind for what they did to her." The throat of William tightened. What did they do? For a long time. The only sound was the wind brushing against the windows. Then Alice looked at him with watery eyes and said, "You are not the first child she carried." The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. William froze, his mind struggling to process them. "You mean she was very young?" Alice continued. "Barely prepared. They told her it was too early, that it was not safe, that the world was not ready to see it. The pregnancy was hidden. Only a few of us knew. When the baby came, it was premature. A little girl." William felt his pulse hammering. "They said it would ruin everything. So they arranged for her to be taken quietly, raised under another name." The room seemed to blur. The chest of William ached, as though his heart was being crushed. "She lived?" His voice was barely audible. "Yes," Alice whispered. "I do not know what became of her after. I was told to leave, dismissed not long after. But I remember the face of your mother, the way she screamed for her baby, the way they sedated her to stop her from knowing. She never gave up believing the child was alive." William lowered his head, pressing his fingers to his eyes as tears burned behind them. All his life, he had wondered why the sadness of his mother felt deeper than anyone could explain. Now he knew Diana had been haunted not just by a failed marriage or the press or royal duty, but by a loss that was not truly a loss. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Why did no one ever tell me?" "Because the truth," Alice said softly, "was never meant to leave the walls of the palace." When he left the cottage, the air felt different. The waves crashed against the shore like they were echoing the cries of his mother from long ago. He stood there for a long time, staring at the horizon, feeling a strange mixture of grief and fury. The royal image, that polished, untouchable world, had stolen more than freedom. It had stolen love, truth, and a sister he had never known existed. That night, William could not sleep. He sat in his study, the old diary lying open before him. He read the words of his mother again, tracing each line with his fingers. "They told me she was gone, but I feel her still. Somewhere out there, she is breathing, and I hope she knows I loved her." He closed the diary, resting his forehead against it. "I will find her." "Mom," he whispered, "I promise." But as the days passed, he realized that finding her would not be simple. Every record, every document from that time had been carefully erased. Files were missing. Names changed. It was as though someone had built a wall around the truth. Brick by brick, William began to understand the weight of silence. The same silence that had broken his mother. Each time he smiled in public, each time he stood beside his family for photos, he felt the ache grow deeper. The world saw a prince who had everything. But inside he was a man carrying the ghosts of two. The mother who lost her child and the sister he never knew. One evening, as the rain poured softly against the palace windows, Kate entered the study. She found him staring at the diary again. "You cannot carry this alone," she said gently. He looked up, eyes tired. "If I tell anyone, it could destroy everything." Kate knelt beside him, taking his hand. "But hiding it is destroying you." William said nothing. He only stared into the fire, the flickering light reflecting in his eyes, somewhere in the silence. He could almost hear the voice of his mother, gentle, warm, filled with love. That night, he walked to the window and looked out into the dark gardens below. The world outside was peaceful, but inside, his heart was a storm. He now understood why Diana had been restless, why her eyes often looked far away. Even when she smiled, she had been searching for the truth, for the daughter she never got to hold, and now her son would do the same. The secret that the palace buried would no longer stay hidden, not while he was alive to speak for the sister they stole from the shadows. The sister in the shadows. The sky over Norfolk was painted in shades of silver and gray, the kind of day that carried both peace and sorrow in its silence. Inside Anmer Hall, Prince William sat alone by the window, watching the rain trace slow paths down the glass. Months had passed since he uncovered the secret of his mother, the hidden truth that had changed everything he thought he knew about his family. But just when he thought the pain had settled, a new letter arrived, one that made his hands tremble as he broke the seal. It came from a private law firm in London. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar, neat but hesitant. Inside was a short note from a solicitor claiming to represent a woman who believed she had ties to the late Princess Diana. The letter was careful in its tone, stating confidential royal medical file dated before your birth. William read the line again and again, his chest tightening with every word. He folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the diary of Diana, the one that had started everything. It cannot be, he whispered to himself, though part of him already knew it could. After days of silence and thought, he made his decision. There would be no palace involvement, no advisors, and no headlines. This was something he had to face alone. A week later, on a quiet morning, he drove out of the city, disguised in a plain jacket and cap, leaving the royal world far behind. The meeting place was a small countryside cafe tucked between rolling fields. Its sign was faded, its windows fogged from the warmth inside. When he walked in, his heart pounded so hard he could barely breathe. She was already there, sitting near the corner window. The woman rose as he approached. Her hair was soft and golden brown, her features gentle, but it was her eyes that stopped him. Blue. The same deep, kind blue he had seen every time he looked at old photos of his mother. For a long moment, neither spoke. William finally whispered, "You look familiar." Her voice trembled as she replied, "I have seen you on television my whole life, but I never imagined this day would come." They sat, the silence heavy but not cold. Slowly, she began to tell her story. She had been adopted as a baby, raised by kind people who had little to offer but love. All her life, she had carried a sense of not belonging, a feeling that her story had been erased before it began. Years later, when she searched for her birth records, she found fragments that did not fit. A birth under protection. A sealed file marked Royal Medical Record. As she spoke, tears filled the eyes of William. Every word, every memory echoed the truth he had already begun to accept. "I do not know what to say," he whispered. She smiled softly. "You do not have to say anything. I just wanted to know if I was real." If she was real, William reached across the table, his hand shaking as he took hers. "She was real," he said quietly, "and she loved you." She never stopped. They sat for hours, talking about life, about what could have been. She told him about her small home by the sea, her work at a hospice for children, her simple, quiet life, far from the chaos of royalty. William listened, his heart torn between peace and sorrow. Every gesture, every smile reminded him of Diana. The warmth, the gentleness, even the tilt of her head. It was like seeing a part of his mother reborn. As the sun began to set, the cafe emptied. William knew he could never make this public. The monarchy was fragile, and a revelation like this could tear it apart. But he also knew he could not walk away. He looked into her eyes and said softly, "You will never be alone again. I promise." She nodded, tears spilling silently. "I do not want anything from you," she whispered, "just to know I am not forgotten." William stood and embraced her. holding her as if he could shield her from every storm that had ever touched their family. "You are not forgotten," he murmured. "You are part of us, even if the world cannot know." When he left the cafe, the night air was cool and still. He looked up at the sky, where stars were just beginning to appear, and felt a strange calm settle over him. Somewhere, he believed, Diana was watching, smiling through the dark, proud that her two children had finally found each other, even if in secret. As William drove away, he knew life would return to its royal rhythm. The cameras, the duties, the careful smiles, but deep inside, something had changed forever. He now carried a truth that no crown, no throne, no royal decree could ever erase. The soft glow of a London evening fell across the study of Prince William, painting the room in shades of gold and quiet sorrow. The house was still. The laughter of his children had faded upstairs, and Kate had gone to bed hours earlier. But William remained, seated at his desk, a blank page before him, and a pen trembling between his fingers. It had taken him years to find the courage for this moment. Tonight, the weight of everything he carried pressed down on him. The hidden truth of the sister lost to time was no longer just a secret. It was part of who he was, and part of what his children would one day need to understand. He began to write slowly, carefully, each word drawn from the deepest corners of his heart. This was not a letter to the world. It was not meant for newspapers or historians or royal archives. It was a letter for his children. A message meant to find them when they were old enough to understand that truth often lives quietly beneath the noise of duty and fame. He told them everything about their grandmother, the warmth she carried, the pain she endured, about a sister who lived far from the cameras, unknown to the world but not forgotten. He wrote that life within the crown was never about perfection or power. It was about humanity, about love, and above all, forgiveness. He paused, closing his eyes for a moment. "You will read this one day," he whispered softly into the still air, "and I hope you will understand." The thoughts of William drifted to her, the sister he had met only once, the woman whose presence had quietly healed a part of his heart. She lived a simple life now near the sea, far from royal walls and flashing lights. She wanted no fame, no recognition, and William had promised her peace every year on the birthday of their mother. He kept that promise,